Hey YouTubers, welcome to the Cyber Overwatch channel. I am Pragmatic One. In this video, I will be doing a walkthrough of the TryHackMe Baron Samedit room, CVE-2021-3156. I will provide a general overview of the Baron Samedit vulnerability. I will discuss what sudo is and what it's used for. I'll also cover briefly Baron Samedit's discovery. Additionally, I will review the vulnerability associated with CVE-2021-3156, a heap buffer overflow vulnerability found in the sudo program. Finally, in this demonstration, I'll show you how an attacker can exploit sudo to escalate privileges. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. Also, for more content, please regularly check back on www.cybersec.com. CVE-2021-3156, named Baron Samedit, was originally discovered by the Qualys research team. The discovery was significant due to the criticality of the heap buffer overflow vulnerability in sudo. The sudo program is extensively used and is present in major Unix-based operating systems. This vulnerability, if not patched, poses a serious security threat as it will allow unprivileged local users to exploit the default sudo configuration and gain full root privileges on the vulnerable host. Sudo, a powerful utility integrated into most Unix-based OSs. Sudo grants users the ability to execute programs with the security privileges of another user. Typically, users initiate a sudo command by entering sudo followed by the desired command in the CLI. For instance, sudo /bin/bash. When a user possesses the necessary permissions to use sudo, their information is usually listed in the sudoers file located on /etc/sudoers. This file serves as a means for administrators to assign system privileges to specific users, thereby allowing administrators to exercise control over these actions. The Qualys research team originally discovered the vulnerability on January 13, 2021. Similar to previous Unix-based vulnerabilities, this vulnerability had evaded detection for nearly a decade. During Qualys's research team's investigation, it was discovered that on July 2011, the vulnerability was originally introduced into commit 8255ed69. This vulnerability affects all legacy sudo versions from 1.8.2 to 1.8.31p2 and all stable versions from 1.9.0 to 1.9.5p1 when default configurations are used. The Qualys research team meticulously verified the vulnerability and even developed multiple exploit variants, successfully obtaining full root privileges on widely used systems such as Ubuntu, Debian, and Fedora. Considering the ubiquity of sudo, it is highly probable that other operating systems and distributions are also susceptible to exploitation. CVE-2021-3156 is a critical heap overflow vulnerability found in the sudo binary during the parsing of command line arguments. This particular vulnerability enables the attacker to escalate their privileges to root if successfully exploited. The significance of this vulnerability lies in the fact that it occurs in userland, which means there is no risk of crashing the system during exploitation process. When properly exploited, CVE-2021-3156 allows an attacker to bypass the intended restrictions and gain unauthorized access with elevated privileges. By carefully crafting specific command line arguments, an attacker can trigger the heap-based buffer overflow, which can lead to execution of arbitrary code with root privileges. This essentially grants the attacker complete control over the affected system. A generalized explanation of the vulnerability is that when executing a command in sudo using the shell mode shell-c command, either through the -s option or the -i option, certain parts of the code are vulnerable to heap-based buffer overflow. In the pseudocode snippet shown in the video, the parse args function in sudo's main function is responsible for rewriting argv line 609 to 617 by concatenating all command line arguments and escaping meta characters with backslashes. However, there is a slight discrepancy in conditions between the code that escapes meta characters and the code that later unescapes them. This vulnerability arises when the command line argument ends with a single backslash character, as shown in line 590 to 591. In the set command function within sudoers policy main, the command line arguments are concatenated into the user args buffer line 864 to 871 shown in this video, and the meta characters are unescaped for sudoers matching and logging purposes. The issue arises when a command line argument ends with a single backslash character. The unescaping process causes out of bounds characters to be copied to the user args buffer, leading to a heap-based buffer overflow. The overflow occurs because the out of bounds characters were not included in the size calculations of the user args buffer. In theory, this vulnerability should not occur because parse_args function already escapes all meta characters including backslashes when mode shell or mode login shell is set. However, the conditions surrounding the vulnerable code in set command and the escape code in parse_args differ slightly, allowing this vulnerability to be exploited. Through their research, the Qualys research team was able to determine that it is not possible to set mode shell along with either mode edit or mode check to trigger the vulnerable code without triggering the escape code. If mode edit -E option or mode check -L option are set, then parse_args removes mode shell from the valid flags and exits with an error if an invalid flag like mode shell is specified. The workaround is by executing sudo as sudo edit instead of sudo. Parse_args automatically sets mode edit without resetting the valid flags. By default, the valid flags include mode shell, allowing the attacker to set both mode edit and mode shell without mode run, thereby bypassing the escape code, reaching the vulnerable code, and causing a heap-based buffer overflow by providing a command line argument that ends with a single backslash character. Exploiting this buffer overflow is highly advantageous for the attacker due to the following reasons. The attacker controls the size of the user args buffer, which determines the extent of the overflow. The attacker independently controls the size and contents of the overflow itself, taking advantage of the fact that the environment variables following the command line arguments are not included in the size calculations. The attacker can even write null bytes to the overflowed buffer as any command line argument or environment variable ending with a single backslash, writing a null byte to user args. Let's start the demo. In Task 1, TryHackMe provides instructions on deploying the vulnerable machine. Task 2 provides an overview of the Baron Samedit vulnerability. From this task, TryHackMe also provides the steps to exploit the vulnerability. Now that the vulnerable host is up, we can begin testing. I logged into the target host via SSH using the credentials provided by TryHackMe. To view the version of the vulnerable host's OS, you can run lsb_release -a as shown in the CLI. It shows the vulnerable host is Ubuntu 18.04 LTS Bionic. To verify whether the target host is vulnerable, you can run the following proof of concept created by Lockbite by entering the following command as shown in the CLI. The command attempts to execute the sudo edit command in script mode, where the content of the script is set to a string consisting of 1,000 capital A's. Since the backslash character is not properly escaped, it should result in a syntax error. As you can see, the result was an error showing the host is vulnerable. In order to exploit this vulnerability, I will need to download a working exploit. One can be downloaded from blasty/CVE-2021-3156 GitHub repository. Once on the GitHub page, just click the copy icon after clicking the code dropdown to copy the Git address. In order to download the exploit, I ran the git clone command on Kali as shown in the CLI. I navigated to the exploit folder. In order to use the exploit, I will need to compile the code. I run the make command from the exploit folder to create the exploit as shown in the CLI. Now that the exploit is created, I'll start my HTTP server from the exploit folder. With my HTTP server running from the vulnerable host, I'll run wget to download the exploit to the temp folder as shown in the CLI. Now that the exploit is uploaded, I verified using the ls--la command that the file can't be executed. Since the exploit does not have the execute permissions set, I set the exploit to execute using the changed_mod command as shown in the CLI. I changed the permissions and now I can run the exploit using the following command shown in the CLI. Since earlier I had checked the version of this particular vulnerable host, I selected 0 for Ubuntu 18.04. After running the exploit, I was able to get root. Now that we have a root shell, we can now get the root flag as shown in the CLI. Looking at task 2, the first question asks what executable is created when the exploit is compiled. When running the make command, it creates the executable sudo hacks me a sandwich. The second question is, what is the flag in the flag text? Both answers have been entered, and this room is now completed. In the end, I was able to exploit the vulnerability that gave me root privileges. To mitigate the risk posed by CVE-2021-3156, it is crucial to apply the necessary security patches promptly. This is an old vulnerability that has a patch addressing this issue, which should be applied as soon as possible to protect systems from potential attacks. Organizations should also consider implementing strong security practices such as least privilege and regular monitoring to enhance their overall defense against similar vulnerabilities in the future. For developers, it is crucial to address this vulnerability by implementing appropriate balance checking and ensuring consistent conditions for escaping and unescaping meta characters in the pseudocode base. Thank you for tuning in to the brief demonstration of the Baron Samedit TryHackMe room. Thank you for also checking out the Cyber Overwatch channel. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. Although this video was a quick walkthrough, I sincerely hope it provided you with valuable insight. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave me a question in the comments or send me a message from the CyberSec website listed in the description. Until next time, keep learning. The only way to improve is to keep learning. Pragmatic One signing off.